Clint Eastwood has outdrawn bandits, taken down crime bosses, and stared into cameras with a gaze that could freeze the air. But in real life, there was someone who could disarm him without ever firing a shot. Her name was Sondra Locke, actress, director, razor-sharp mind, and according to those who knew him best, the only woman who could truly rattle Clint Eastwood. You'd think that after nearly a century of life, countless roles, and a public image made of granite, nothing could leave a lasting mark. But Eastwood himself once told a friend something haunting. "She was the only one who could do that to me." Whether those exact words were spoken or not, what's undeniable is that Locke's presence altered the course of his life. Before her, Clint Eastwood was untouchable. After her, he was never quite the same. The 1970s Clint Eastwood was more than a movie star. He was an institution. By then, he'd already conquered television with Rawhide, redefined the Western with Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, and created a new archetype of law enforcement with Dirty Harry. But the roles mirrored the man. Friends described him as calculated, reserved, and always holding a part of himself back. He could charm anyone, but very few ever got past the surface. Journalists who tried to profile him often left with the same note. Hard to read. He'd dodge personal questions with a grin, offer a quick quip, then steer the conversation back to work. At Hollywood dinners, he was the man everyone wanted at their table, and the one who slipped out before the night got too personal. By the time he met Locke, Eastwood had already left a trail of high-profile relationships, models, actresses, musicians. The pattern was clear. He kept his options open, his feelings guarded, and his personal life in the shadows. But in 1975, on the set of the outlaw Josie Wales, that pattern began to crack. Sondra Locke wasn't just another actress. She had earned an Academy Award nomination for her very first film role in The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. She was ambitious, witty, and unwilling to fade into the background, a direct contrast to the women Clint usually dated. They met on set under the blistering sun of a Texas filming location. Locke later recalled that Clint told her early on he had never been in love before, and he even playfully sang her a made-up refrain, "She made me monogamous." Crew members noticed an instant spark. Between takes, they'd share quiet conversations, leaning in just close enough that it seemed conspiratorial. Locke had a way of speaking to Clint that skipped the small talk and went straight to something real. One production assistant remembered hearing Locke laugh at something Clint said. Not the careful, flirty laugh stars often use, but a loud, genuine one. Clint grinned, and for the rest of that day, he kept finding excuses to be near her. It was the start of a 13-year partnership that would blend art, love, and eventually, devastation. The next decade was, in the public eye, their golden era. They made 6 films together. The Outlaw Josie Wales, The Gauntlet, Bronco Billy, Every Which Way But Loose, Any Which Way You Can, and Sudden Impact. On the set of The Gauntlet, there was a scene where Eastwood's character drives Locke through a hail of bullets. Between takes, the two sat in the car, engine idling, while the crew reset the scene. Clint leaned back, arm draped over the seat, and the two of them just talked. No script, no cameras. A sound tech sitting outside caught a few words through the window. They were making plans for after filming wrapped. Locke said Clint wanted us always to be together and insisted everything he had was ours together. Around her, friends said, he seemed looser, even goofy at times. But there was a subtle tug-of-war happening. Locke wanted to direct, to control her own projects. Clint, used to being the center of the creative universe, struggled with that shift. The trouble started quietly. Locke was still legally married to her friend Gordon Anderson and lived with Clint while still maintaining that unusual arrangement. Eastwood tolerated it at first, but resentment grew. One night, Locke returned from dinner to find Clint pacing the living room, phone in hand. He hung up quickly when she walked in. She asked who it was. He shrugged, muttered, "Just business," and changed the subject. She would later learn he'd been speaking to another woman, one of several. Eastwood later admitted, she spent 98 to 100% of her time coddling him. I was bored with it, but boredom wasn't the only factor. His affairs, some resulting in children, were happening even as Locke and Clint presented themselves as a couple. In 1989, things detonated. While Locke was away, Eastwood had the locks changed on their home. She returned to find herself literally shut out of her life. That action sparked a palimony lawsuit that became Hollywood news for years. Eastwood publicly minimized their relationship, calling her a roommate and then a part-time roommate. But a friend later told a biographer Clint had called her the love of his life in private. After the lockout, Locke called Clint's office asking to meet face-to-face. The receptionist told her he was unavailable. She tried again weeks later. Same response. She would later write that it felt as though he had vanished from her life overnight, except for the lawyers. Their split became as cinematic as any Western standoff. Only this time, there was no director to yell, "Cut." The legal battles ended in confidential settlements, but the damage lingered. In her memoir, Locke accused Eastwood of pressuring her into multiple abortions and a tubal ligation, allegations he denied. In 2025, biographer Sean Levy described Eastwood's affairs as addictive, with Clint himself admitting his compulsions were hard to resist. Years later, during a press junket, a journalist casually mentioned Locke's name. Clint's face changed, a brief flicker, then a grin. He shifted the conversation to the weather in Carmel and didn't answer the question. The publicist moved the interview along. Locke, for her part, never softened her view of their time together. She once said, "He had every right, if he didn't love me, to end the relationship, but he didn't have the right to treat me that way." Now picture Clint Eastwood in his Carmel estate, shelves lined with Oscars, Golden Globes, and decades of scripts. Somewhere in that space, maybe tucked in a drawer, is a photograph of her. Not for display, just for memory. Not the lawsuits, not the bitter statements, just the way she looked at him when the cameras weren't rolling, the way she could quiet him with nothing more than a glance. She was the only one who could do that to me. Whether fact or myth, that idea tells us something no film role ever could. Even the most unshakable legends have moments when the armor cracks. And for Clint Eastwood, Sondra Locke was that moment.